How's it going, guys? Bill and Gavin here from Bolt Pools and Spas. Just want to say congratulations and thank you very much for choosing Bolt Pools and Spas for your above ground pool purchase. Okay, so 2 things we'll be going over in this video today. First, we'll be taking a look at water chemistry. We'll be going over chemicals that you'll be using in order to keep your pool nice and clean. The second, your pool equipment. We'll be going over the equipment piece by piece. This will allow any questions to be answered and allow you to get the most out of your above ground pool experience. So now we're going to take a look at your above ground pool pad. We'll take a look at the equipment piece by piece and show you how to use it. The most important piece on your above ground equipment pad is your pump. Everything begins and ends with the pump. Some consider it to be the heartbeat of the pool. Your pump will have a simple on and off switch. The pump's job is to draw the water through the skimmer into your filter and your chlorinating equipment and get it back to the pool.
Let's talk about the skimmer first. So the skimmer is kind of your first line of defense when it comes to cleaning your pool. Larger debris such as leaves, large insects, things like that, those are gonna get caught in that skimmer basket. If you have a lot of trees around your pool, I really recommend at least checking it a couple times a week. The more debris clogging that basket is gonna clog the flow of water through your pool. So you really need to stay on top of that. So to clean out that skimmer basket, we wanna take off the lid of the skimmer. It's gonna be that white rectangle that's on the side of your pool. Take off the lid, we'll reach in, we take out the basket, it just lifts out. There's no screw or anything like that. We lift out the basket, just shake it upside down or knock it against a fence gently, something like that. Get all that debris, the leaves out, place it back inside. Again, it doesn't need to screw into place, it just sits in there, and put the lid back on that skimmer.
Your above ground pool pump is self-priming. This means that you have to have your valve open prior to starting your pump. Your pump also has a basket that needs to be clean, just like the skimmer. So you want to make sure that that is clear and free of debris. To do this, you will need to power off your pump and close your valve before opening your lid slowly. Make sure that any sort of pressure is released and opening it counterclockwise. In here, you will see your basket. If there's any debris in there, you'll lift the basket out, shake it, empty it out, and then replace it. From there, you'll take your pump lid, put it back on, and close the lid. You'll need to make sure that your valve is open. As we said before, your pump is self-priming, so it needs water to be flowing through the valve and into your pump before you start your pump back up.
So next up we have the sand filter. Now the sand filter looks a lot more intimidating than it is, I promise. The 3 most important parts on the sand filter are gonna be your sight glass, your pressure gauge, and then the filter head itself. So that's the handle that's sticking out here. Now there are about 8 different settings. Your most important are going to be filter and backwash, but let's go through them one at a time. Starting at filter, filtration is gonna be your primary setting. It's gonna be 80-90% of the time, probably higher. You're always gonna be on filter when the pool is running. Now your pressure gauge is gonna be your cheat sheet to see how dirty your filter is. Now a normal setting is gonna be between 10 and 20 PSI. As it creeps up, your filter is getting dirtier. And that means it's doing its job. It's trapping more particulate, more debris inside that filter, so there's more stuff in the filter. So once it creeps up towards that 15 mark, it's time to backwash. That's where your second setting comes in. Now backwash, to start, we're gonna need to put on your backwash fitting. Now the fitting is just gonna screw into that one open port that you have on your backwash head. You're gonna roll out your backwash hose, attach it, use the clamp that's there, like so. You are then going to turn off the pump. Now this is important. You never wanna change your settings while the pump is on. It just is gonna prolong the life of your equipment. So we're gonna now move the handle to the backwash setting. Your hose has already been rolled out till the end of the driveway. And then we're gonna turn on your pump again. So this is gonna start pushing water through the filter and kind of releasing that debris and getting rid of that, cleaning out the filter. We're gonna look at your sight glass now, and that's where that comes in. Now the sight glass will start out clean. It'll turn to a little bit dirty water. That means we're getting rid of that contaminants, getting rid of that debris, and then it will turn clean again. Once it returns to that clean appearance, that's when you're kind of done backwashing. So next we have rinse. After the backwash, we need to rinse. It's kind of like doing your dishes. You have soap all over the dishes, and you need to rinse it off. Now remember, anytime we're changing the filter port setting, we need to first turn off our pump. So turn off the pump, go to your handle, move that from the backwash to the rinse position, and then turn on your pump again. When you're doing your rinse, just make sure you do about a 30-second rinse, just to make sure you get that last little bit of debris. So your next setting would be waste. Your waste is used in a couple of situations. Now the first one is if there's a lot of rainwater, something like that, your pool is filling up a lot higher than it should, that waste setting is going to purge or get rid of that extra water. And now when we use any of these settings, we're gonna need that backwash line. attached. So do that just as you did in our last few steps. Now again, pump off, we switch to our waste setting, pump back on, and now that water is going to start to drain. Now you want to drain to about 3/4 of the way up the skimmer, or you're on that top set of screws. And that's the level where your pool water should be. Your second situation where you're going to use the waste is if, let's say, there's a lot of debris on the pool floor, maybe you're trying to get algae straight out of the pool, something like that. You can vacuum on a waste setting. Now we'll talk about vacuuming later, but this will just purge that debris right out of the pool, and it won't go into your filter. So this can be good if it's very, very dirty, something like that, and we don't want to clog up that filter. Next, we have recirculate. Now recirculate I often use as a test. So it's going to bypass the filter altogether. Water's going to come straight through the pump, through the filter, and right onto your next piece of equipment. It's not going to go through the filter at all. It's going to go straight through the head. I often use this as a test at the start of the season, or if you find water pressure is getting bogged down a little bit or is slowing down. Now a good test to use is if we have you know what your pressure feels like when you're on filter setting. Put your hand in front of the return jet, see how strong it is. Now turn off your pump, move that filter port head to recirculate, turn back on your pump, put your hand in front of that return jet again and see if there's a difference. If your jet is now much stronger, that means that your filter is acting as a bottleneck. It's full, water's moving slow through it, and so we need to do a backwash. And so you just see those previous steps that we did to backwash, and you just do a nice and thorough backwash, and you're gonna regain that pressure. So lastly, we have your winter setting. Now your winter setting, as the name suggests, we're gonna use in the winter time when it's time to close down your pool. Now the winter setting is going to leave every port open. Now you want to do this because water expands when it freezes. Obviously it's very cold in the winter, and we don't want that expansion to lead to something breaking inside your filter port head. So we put it on the winter setting for when we close down the pool. We're going to undo all of the drain plugs, take off your sight glass, take off your pressure gauge, very important. Now one thing I highly, highly recommend, a little bit off topic, but get a nice Tupperware container, something like that. Put all your drain plugs, put all your sight glasses, everything like that in this Tupperware. They are the number one thing that's lost by pool owners, and every year in the spring they come in to buy new ones. So just make sure you keep track of those items. Now for the closed setting. Now the closed setting really isn't used by any pool owner. It's more meant for technicians when they're in the field. We don't use this when we close down for the winter because it closes off every filter port head. So you're never really going to use this setting. It's really just for the technician, so you don't need to worry about that. One last tip for the sand filter. The sand inside the filter gets dirty over time, and that's why we're backwashing. The sand typically is going to last you about 5 to 6 years. People typically change the sand when they're just tired of backwashing so often. The older the sand is, the more often you need to backwash. When you're tired of that, replace the sand.
So the other type of filter that you may have is a cartridge filter. The cartridge filter is a little different than the sand filter in the sense that you will not have to backwash anymore. Now, it's not using sand to filter the debris from your pool. This is actually using a paper cartridge filter. Now, this is something that will need to be inspected and cleaned regularly. When it's time to clean your cartridge, it's very important that your pump is off, your valves are closed, and you release the pressure from the top of your filter. This is a pressure release valve. Open that up and let the air release. From there, you will be draining the filter. This is done by removing the drain plug at the bottom of the filter. Let the water run out. Now you are set to open the collar and remove the head of the filter. Your cartridge filter has a pressure gauge that indicates whether your cartridge is clean or dirty. Your regular usage, as we spoke about with the sand filter, will have a specific PSI. If your normal PSI is around that 10 mark, when it raises about 5 to 7 PSI, it will be at the dirty setting on the filter. This is an indication that it's time to rinse your filter. Now that you've soaked that cartridge overnight, it's very important that you rinse it out thoroughly before replacing in your cartridge filter. From there, you'll want to make sure that your drain plug is closed. You put your cartridge back into the filter, replace the head, and lock the collar.
So now let's talk about sanitization. Now there's 3 items or pieces of equipment that you may have for sanitizing your pool. We're going to go into them one at a time. First up is your automatic chlorinator, or your Vision Pro. Now this unit is broken up into 2 columns. The left side is going to take chlorine pucks. The right side is going to take your mineral cartridge. Now we'll start with the mineral cartridge because it's a little bit easier. Mineral cartridge basically improves your water quality, adds a little bit of mineral to the water. This is to be changed every year. If you do not change the mineral cartridge, it doesn't do any harm, but you're not gaining any benefit from that. So to change that regularly or once a year is going to keep improving that water quality. Now the chlorine pucks, it's a little bit of a learning curve when we add chlorine pucks to the left side of the cartridge, because they dissolve at different rates. It depends on the flow rate you've selected. It depends on how many pucks you put in there. So there will be a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to this. It also depends on how big your pool is. What I typically recommend is we add about 3 pucks and we put it at a setting of 3. Now to do this, you just unscrew the top cap, put the chlorine pucks in. Now these are king size pucks. They look like a hockey puck. It can fit quite a number of them, but you're never going to fill that full. I'd say start with about 3 or 4 at a setting of 3. And we're going to use our chlorine test strips down the road to see if our chlorine reading is high enough. If it's not, maybe we add more pucks or we increase the flow rate. If it's too low, then maybe we back off. Maybe we add 1 less puck, or maybe we add a lower flow rate. And you can chat with your salesman about that, but it really just is a little bit of a learning curve. Change it, small changes will make the world a difference, and then you'll be right on your way.
So the next item that you may have is the salt system. Similar to your automatic chlorinator, the salt system will have an output. The output that you choose will be determined by how often you're running your pump. As an example, if you're running your pump 24 hours a day, which is the best practice, your output may be slightly lower than if you're running it, say, 12 hours a day or overnight. Your salt system does need to be calibrated upon first use per season. This can easily be done by following the calibration procedures provided with the unit. This is essentially turning on your salt system, turning on your pump, turning off your pump, turning off your salt system. We do recommend cleaning this cell once a season. This can be done by purchasing your salt cell cleaner from your store. You'll be soaking your cell in the cleaner and making sure that you rinse very, very well before replacing your cell. Okay, so there's 3 main buttons on your salt system control panel. You'll see superchlorinate and your daily chlorine output. Superchlorinate is used to operate your salt system at maximum capacity for 24 hours. The plus and minus buttons are how you decide to change your output. Each button will represent 10%. Again, how you choose your output and what setting you have it at will depend on how often you're running your pump. Your best practice is to operate 24 hours a day. If you were doing this, I do recommend having your salt system set to about 4 or 5. There are also 3 different indicator lights located on your control panel, such as problem detected, cell life low, or inadequate water flow. If any of these indicator lights come on, please get in touch with your salesperson and we'll be happy to troubleshoot.
So the last option you may have is the Pura Vida UV system. Now the UV system is probably the easiest out of your equipment to use because you just plug it in and it's on. To make sure that it's on, there's a little sight glass at the bottom. It's going to glow blue when it's shining bright. The UV works to slow down the growth of bacteria. It helps so you can use a little bit less sanitizer to keep that pool clean. Now there is a little bit of maintenance required from season to season for that UV system. You're going to want to, once the season's shut down and you're closing for winter, you can take out that sight glass, take out the bulb, you give it a wipe down. You always want to use a phosphate-free cleaner when you're cleaning a pool. Phosphates just really mess with your water chemistry. So a phosphate-free cleaner, wipe down the bulb, make sure it's nice and clean, and then it's ready to go for the next season. Now I do recommend when you do close down for the winter, bring that bulb in to the garage, in the basement, wherever you store those items, but just take it out. It doesn't need to stay in there. Now it's time for chemicals. Today we're going to talk about the most important chemicals added to your pool to keep the water balanced and to keep the water sanitized. Let's get into it.
There are 4 important measures that we're going to focus on today. This being your pH, alkalinity, sanitizer being your chlorine, and stabilizer. First, we're going to take a look at pH. Your pH is your major acid and base control of your swimming pool. To adjust your pH, you will either be using your pH up or pH down. The range that we typically strive for is between 7.2 and 7.8 for your pH.
Next we have your alkalinity. Now the chemical we use to increase your alkalinity is typically called AlkaJust, but every brand is going to have a slightly different name for it. Basically that's going to be a pH lock. It helps to keep that pH from fluctuating and keeps it in place in that range that we want. To increase your alkalinity, we're going to add AlkaJust. Aside from your sanitizer levels, your pH is probably what fluctuates most in the pool. You're really going to want to check this weekly. Rain will affect it, the sweat, the chlorine yourself. It's all going to affect that pH, bring it up and bring it down. So you do want to stay on top of that. So at least once a week with your test strips, or by all means you can come to the store as often as you like If you miss us, you can even come every day. But do get that tested and keep that in balance because it will fluctuate.
Next, we'll be talking about your chlorine. This is what will be used to actually sanitize and keep your water clean. As we spoke about before, this can be done using pucks. This can be done using granular chlorine that you mix with water. It can also be done using liquid chlorine purchased from your store. If adding liquid chlorine, our recommendation is always to add the chlorine at nighttime, just as the sun is going down, making sure that your pump is operating for at least 12 hours and making sure that nobody is swimming after adding chlorine for, again, at least 12 hours. A recommendation for all powdered products is to dilute with water prior to adding to your swimming pool. The recommended range for your chlorine is to keep that between 2 and 4 parts per million. Just a reminder, even if you're running a salt system, you do need to keep that chlorine level between 2 and 4 parts per million as well. The salt system is creating chlorine for you.
So the last chemical we want to talk about is stabilizer. Now on the shelf, this could also be called conditioner. Again, different products have different names for it. You can get it in granular or as liquid. In your starter kit of chemicals, it's going to be in a granular form. I'll touch on the liquid in a little bit. The granular form of stabilizer is added in a different way than the rest of your chemicals. You're actually going to get a nylon stocking. You can get it from the dollar store. You can get skimmer socks, something like that. And you want to put what the recommended amount of stabilizer is in that stocking, tie it off, and you leave it in your skimmer. This way it's going to slowly dissolve into the water and properly absorb. If you just throw it over the wall, or as Bill described earlier, mixing it with a little bit of water, kind of brewing a potion, it's not going to be absorbed properly. So it really does need to slow dissolve through that skimmer. The liquid, on the other hand, you just shake very thoroughly and pour into the skimmer. So they're a little bit different there. Same effectiveness. So if you can't get one, the other, they're kind of tomato in that respect, and they're going to do just as good for you. Another option would be stabilizer pucks, which some of our stores have. These, unlike chlorine pucks, can just sit in your skimmer and again slowly dissolve to get that chemical into the water. Typically, you want to keep your stabilizer between 30 and 50 parts per million. Now, something to be mindful of: if you're using chlorine pucks are stabilized, so that's going to gradually increase your stabilizer level. So at the start of the season, maybe we don't add that full amount of stabilizer because your pucks will get you there over time. What this stabilizer is really doing is helping to prolong the life of your chlorine. It's helping so that it doesn't burn off in the sun, it lasts longer in the water, and you don't need to add as much. So it is an important thing to be balanced. It's going to ultimately allow you to add less into the water.
Next, we're going to chat about keeping your pool clean. Here we have your maintenance equipment needed when cleaning your pool. This will be your net, your brush, your vacuum hose, vacuum head, and pole. First, we're going to want to make sure to get any heavy debris such as leaves out of the pool ahead of time with your net, and then following by brushing your walls.
Now, to vacuum up all of that debris, we're going to use your vacuum. Now, your vacuum has brushes on it, so it can kind of scrub as well at the same time. How are you going to hook this up? You use your vacuum pole, which is the same pole you'd use for your net or your brush, but you also need to attach your hose. So the hose is going to go into the vacuum head on one side, and the other end is going to plug into your skimmer. Now, there's a vacuum plate that's going to go on your skimmer. It's going to sit right on top of that skimmer basket that we talked about earlier. It kind of looks like a dinner plate, but with a cylinder sticking out. And that's where your hose is going to plug into. Now, let's get your vacuum head and the pole in the water. Take the hose, and now we're going to prime it. We want it to be full of water. We don't want it to be full of air, so that the pump sucks in water and not air. So we are going to prime it by putting it in front of your return jet. That's going to push water through that hose, get it nice and prepped for us. After that's been primed, all the bubbles are out. We're going to plug that into that dinner plate or that vacuum plate that's in the skimmer now, and that's going to create the flow or the suction that's pulling through your vacuum. If you don't have that vacuum plate, that's not a problem. Now, it is included for new above ground pool kits, but let's say you break it, something like that, no problem. The hose can actually just go directly into the skimmer. So you remove that skimmer basket and put it right down in the plumbing, and that's going to create enough of a seal to pull that water and drive that through the vacuum. So you can still do that even without the skimmer plate.
Some of you may also have purchased an automatic cleaner. The automatic cleaner can be attached to the end of the hose where you would normally have that on your vacuum head. This will be done exactly the same way, priming the hose and inserting into your skimmer. The automatic cleaner will then hop along randomly along the bottom of your pool and vacuuming up debris.